HOA Karen banged on my pregnant wife's window. I'm the National Guard commander. My name is Marcus Adebayo, and when I tell people what I do for a living, they usually shift in their seats. Not out of fear, but out of the sudden realization that they were just joking about something I've probably seen in real combat. I command the 173rd Domestic Response Unit of the National Guard. In short, I'm trained to lead under pressure, respond to national emergencies, and handle chaos with calm. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the way Karen Witherspoon stormed into our lives. Disguised as a concerned neighbor and backed by a fake HOA charter, she enforced like a tyrant with a grudge. It began with a knock, not just any knock, a slam. We just moved to Maple Hollow 2 weeks earlier, into a modest but bright house on the corner of Sweetbriar Lane. My wife, Lila, was 7 months pregnant with twins, and after 3 false alarms in the city, we agreed it was time to trade sirens and concrete for quiet and grass. Maple Hollow looked like a brochure-trimmed lawns, toy-filled yards, and sidewalks clean enough to eat off. Too clean. That should have been my first clue. The day we arrived, people stared but didn't wave. Only one person came by, a woman in mirrored sunglasses, white slacks, and a shirt embroidered with Maple Hollow HOA Enforcement Liaison. No official seal, no name tag. She didn't introduce herself. She pointed to our moving truck. "You'll want to unload before 4 p.m. or risk a fine," she said, tapping her clipboard. "Section 7, noise regulation." I smiled politely. "Thanks. Didn't realize the HOA was that strict." She sniffed. "Some of us care about community standards. Others just bring problems." Then she looked directly at Lila, who was resting on the porch with her belly cradled beneath a maternity support band. "She planning on wearing that?" Outside, my smile dropped. "Excuse me, looks a little medical, violates uniform street aesthetics. It's distracting." I stepped forward. She stepped back. That was the first time Karen Witherspoon and I squared off. It wouldn't be the last. Lila laughed it off at first, though I could see the way she watched the window every time Karen's white SUV cruised slowly past the house. "She probably just needs to feel important," she said. Let's not give her power. But by the second week, it escalated. We received 3 handwritten warnings taped to our front door. Yard light too bright after 9:00 p.m. Curtains not in earth tone compliance, and the worst visible medical devices violate the Street View Serenity Clause. That last one came with a photo of Lila, taken from outside, while she was napping on the living room couch. I was furious. Lila was shaken. We filed a report with the county, but because it wasn't a real HOA, just a self-organized group of concerned homeowners, there was little law enforcement could do without direct harassment. That changed on a Thursday morning in late spring. I'd left for morning drills at the guard base 30 minutes away. Lila stayed home, feet up, hydrating like her OB begged her to. That's when Karen showed up. No knock, no doorbell, just a fist slamming on the living room window, again and again, rattling the glass, shouting something about a violation. When Lila didn't come out, Karen circled the house, screaming about blocking the view, about faking pregnancy for sympathy, and about visual pollution. Lila called me mid-panic attack. "I'm hiding in the bathroom," she whispered, shaking. "She won't leave." I broke traffic laws getting home. When I arrived, Karen had parked diagonally across our driveway, effectively trapping my wife in the house if she needed to leave. I ran toward her SUV, saw the shattered remains of our porch ceramic planter at her feet, and yelled, "Step away from my house." She didn't flinch. Instead, she pointed at me and said, "You should be ashamed, letting your woman disrespect community standards. You think you're above the rules." That was the last time I tried to reason with her. The next day, I started digging. I contacted the real estate attorney who'd helped us close on the home. He confirmed my suspicion. Maple Hollow's HOA charter expired in 2015. There was no active board, no legitimate enforcement body, Karen had created a fake HOA identity and printed her own warning letters and citations, using formatting ripped from old templates. Worse, she'd convinced about a dozen neighbors to pay her quarterly dues for community management, which she deposited in an account registered to a shell nonprofit, Maple Serenity Group, Inc. She was collecting over $500 a month from unsuspecting residents. It wasn't just annoying, it was criminal. I compiled everything: warnings, threats, photos, and a video I retrieved from our Ring camera that showed her slapping Lila's window with the flat of her hand, shouting obscenities. But before I made my move, I needed allies. That night, I hosted a welcome BBQ in our backyard. I grilled ribs and corn, set out lemonade, turned on soft jazz, invited every neighbor personally. Karen didn't come. But the people who did started talking. They whispered about their own citations, about Karen calling CPS on a single mom for letting her kid ride a scooter shirtless, about her fining an elderly couple $200 for having a faded mailbox. I asked, casually, "Do you guys remember voting for an HOA board silence?" Then a woman named Deirdre, mid-40s. "Tired eyes," nurse said. "I've lived here 12 years. We've never had a board. Just Karen." And like that, I had my first battalion. We were going to take our street back. But when someone terrorizes your pregnant wife in her own home, when they bang on glass like they're breaching a building, when they shout accusations through the window like it's a war zone, it changes something in you. And unfortunately for Karen Witherspoon, I don't retreat, I mobilize. The night after our barbecue, I sat in the garage-turned office with a pot of black coffee, a military-grade binder, and every printed document I could find. Karen had left a long paper trail. Poorly formatted violation notices with inconsistent font spacing. Red envelopes marked final warning with no legal signatures. An Excel sheet taped to our door with a list of approved lawn plants. The deeper I dug, the more absurd it became. She was running an imaginary regime, a dictatorship disguised as a neighborhood group. She created HOA minutes with only her name listed under attending. She printed HOA decals from Vistaprint, stuck them on her SUV, and paraded the block like she was on patrol. She posted fake citations on the Nextdoor app using an anonymous handle, but her phrasing gave her away. She always used words like aesthetic pollution and optical disorderliness. I gathered everything into a file labeled Maple Hollow Fraud. Then I added something else, the footage. I'd retrieved a clear, time-stamped video from our Ring camera showing Karen slapping the window 3 times while Lila was visibly in distress inside. She shouted, "You're faking. That's not real pregnancy weight. That's sympathy fat." That's when Lila backed into the couch, shaking, and dialed me. I didn't just want her stopped. I wanted the community to see the truth. But before going public, I needed leverage. I reached out to an old friend, Major Valerie Torres, retired intelligence officer turned fraud investigator for the State Housing Authority. I briefed her, showed her the fake letters and the HOA dues account tied to Maple Serenity Group, Inc. Her reaction: "Marcus, this isn't just civil fraud. If she collected money under false pretenses, impersonated a legal entity, and used intimidation tactics, it's potentially wire fraud, harassment, and impersonation of authority. That's a felony stack." Music to my ears. We started small. Deirdre, the nurse from the BBQ, volunteered to go through her bank statements. She'd been paying Karen quarterly since 2021. Then old Mr. Gaines, an 83-year-old vet with a bad hip, showed me a letter Karen sent threatening escalation to county enforcement if he didn't repaint his door to a calm hue. It was a rust red, his wife's favorite. She passed away last year. I looked him in the eye and promised, "You're getting that door back, sir." He smiled me, but his eyes watered. Within 5 days, we had testimonies from 12 neighbors, 5 recorded interviews, copies of 21 phony notices, and bank transfers from over $10,000 in HOA dues. I sent the whole packet to Major Torres. She handed it off to the state attorney's office. Then we waited. In the meantime, Karen got bolder. When she realized fewer people were answering her door knocks, she retaliated by leaving plastic compliance baskets on porches full of beige paint samples, fake citations, and neighborhood code books she wrote herself. She placed one on our front step the same day Lila returned from her latest OB visit with leg cramps and swelling. Inside the basket, a typed note. This community values appearances. If your wife insists on being visible, she should at least present in accordance with standards. Pregnancy is no excuse. That was it. No more waiting. I called in a favor. The next day, I hosted a town hall. Technically, it wasn't official, just a neighborhood-wide invite to a Sunday community transparency forum at the elementary school gym. But when word got out that someone had filed a formal complaint about Maple Serenity Group Inc., people showed up in force. Over 70 residents crowded in. Karen arrived late, wearing a beige pantsuit and mirrored glasses like she was about to conduct a press conference. She took one look at the projector I'd set up and immediately turned pale. On screen, a still from the Ring camera, her hand on our window, my pregnant wife flinching inside. I demand this be taken down. She snapped. This is slander. I am acting in good faith under HOA authority. I spoke slowly into the mic. Karen, no such HOA exists. The charter expired in 2015. You have no legal standing. Her voice trembled. Then who's been paying me dues all these years? Exactly what I said. We all want to know. Gasps. A few people began whispering. Then I clicked to the next slide, a spreadsheet of her Maple Serenity Group deposits. Account name Karen Witherspoon. Executive Director. She stepped back. This is a setup. He's military. He's trying to intimidate me. I don't need to intimidate. I replied, I have evidence. At that moment, two plainclothes state investigators stepped into the room. They didn't cuff her, but they did escort her out. And when she passed Lila sitting in the front row, her hands on her belly, Karen sneered. All of this because you couldn't handle criticism. Lila looked her dead in the eye and said, no, all of this because you forgot we're people. The crowd erupted in applause. Karen didn't come back to Maple Hollow after that. She moved in with her sister in another county. We later learned she was formally charged with impersonating an officer, fraud, and harassment. The HOA account was frozen. The state began restitution proceedings, but the story wasn't over. Karen was just the face. The problem went deeper. Why was no one questioning the system? Why had silence protected her so long? That became our next mission. When Karen Witherspoon was escorted out of the school gym, there were no handcuffs, no viral moment of justice, just quiet, awkward, painful quiet. Because the truth is, it wasn't just Karen. Yes, she forged a fake HOA. Yes, she terrorized my pregnant wife. Yes, she collected thousands in fake dues. But we had to ask ourselves, why did no one stop her sooner? How did an entire neighborhood surrender to one woman's paranoia? That's what haunted me after the town hall, and that's what I plan to expose next. Over the following weeks, a strange thing happened. Karen disappeared, but her fear lingered. Neighbors still whispered, still peeked through blinds, still hesitated to repaint mailboxes or hang flags. Even without her SUV cruising by, it was like she'd planted something deeper, a fear of stepping out of line. I saw it most in Deirdre. She'd been brave at the start, helping us gather files. But now, she barely waved. I'm just tired, she said when I asked her why she stopped coming to the organizing meetings. It's like, if it wasn't Karen, it would have been someone else. And I realized she was right. Karen had been symptom, not disease. That's when I started my next project. I called it Maple Hollow Rewritten. With a few community volunteers, mostly parents and veterans, I helped create a free-to-access site explaining the rights of homeowners, the difference between voluntary community groups and legally formed HOAs, and how to file reports when harassment disguises itself as order. We even offered free legal referrals. At first, we got maybe 3 visitors a day. By week 2, over 700. A local reporter caught wind of the site and requested an interview. That story exploded. Fake HOA leader terrorizes pregnant veteran's wife. But Commander Fights Back was the headline that hit the front page of our state's largest paper. My name was plastered across military and veterans blogs. We even got invited to speak on a regional podcast about civic courage. But I didn't care about the exposure. I cared about the comments section. Thousands of readers. Stories from New York to Texas. People saying this happened to my dad's neighborhood. Someone faked an HOA and fined him for keeping chickens. Our HOA president bullied my disabled mom until she moved. Thank you. No one talks about how power-hungry these fake committees can get. That was the moment I realized what this fight really was. This wasn't a local squabble. This was a national silence. A sickness where people give up their agency because speaking up feels dangerous. Because they're gaslit into believing one person has all the power. Because somewhere along the way, we forgot that authority isn't what someone claims. It's what the community consents to. With support from a state legal aid group, we hosted a second community meeting this time at the library. I called it What's Real, What's Not Understanding Neighborhood Rights. This time, the room was packed. More important people spoke up. An elderly man stood and told the room Karen once screamed at him for mowing his grass too aggressively. A young mom shared that Karen demanded she stop breastfeeding on her porch because it was indecent. Even the retired postmaster admitted Karen had tried to hand him HOA violation letters and demanded he deliver them with mail. She called my supervisor when I refused. He chuckled, told them I was obstructing community order. I watched something shift in real time. Shame became anger, fear became pride, and for the first time, the people who'd been quiet for years found their voices. But with exposure came danger. 3 weeks after the article went live, I found a letter in our mailbox. No return address. Just typed in block caps, "You should have stayed quiet. What you did to Karen was wrong. You ruined her life. Watch your back." I reported it, of course. The police took it seriously, but unless someone confessed, it was just paper. But I wasn't worried. I'd been through worse. What broke me was seeing Lila read it. Her fingers trembled. She was in her 3rd trimester now. She shouldn't have to worry about stalkers and threats. But she didn't cry. She looked at me and said, "Then we go louder." She posted the letter on the community board with one line underneath, "Silence is how bullies survive." I will not be silent. That post got over 300 reactions. Dozens of neighbors rallied. Some brought food. Others started a neighborhood walk group just to make Lila feel safer during the day. We weren't afraid anymore, and we weren't alone. But then the twist came. One of the former HOA members, Jason Mallory, a smug accountant who used to co-sign Karen's letters, filed a cease and desist against me. He claimed I'd defamed a community initiative and was acting outside proper jurisdiction as a military officer. The nerve. I'm a commander of the National Guard. I swore to protect this country. And yes, that includes our neighborhoods, especially from domestic terror disguised as community order. I lawyered up, filed a counter motion, and made it public. 3 days later, Jason dropped his suit. Why? Because Lila, God bless her, had uncovered something massive. Jason had helped Karen file for nonprofit status using forged signatures from 3 people who never agreed to serve on the board. Forgery, fraud, and the state was ready to reopen their case. Karen wasn't the only one going down. Jason would soon face a civil trial of his own. The tide was turning faster than I expected. HOA signs were ripped down. A local artist painted a mural on an old community fence that read, "We are not property. We are people." Kids chalked messages on sidewalks like, "No more fake fines," and "Pregnant women deserve peace." Even the mayor sent a letter of support, but the most powerful moment came on the 4th of July. I was asked to lead the pledge at our town's parade. Lila stood beside me, glowing in a summer dress, her belly round with life. And the entire crowd stood not just to recite the pledge, but to stand up against fear. Karen had tried to build a cage out of rules. We broke it with truth. Courtrooms are supposed to be places of law, but that day in Maple County Courthouse, it felt more like a reckoning. It wasn't just Karen on trial. It was every silence, every mind your business, every sideways glance that kept her power alive. It was years of letting people like her weaponize order against humanity. I had testified in courtrooms before, mostly as an expert in emergency logistics or civil defense. But standing that day in full uniform, I wasn't just Marcus Adebayo, the commander. I was Marcus Adebayo, Husband to a woman who cried herself to sleep because a stranger told her she wasn't really pregnant. The prosecution opened with the video. Karen banging on our window, Lila flinching, Karen calling her bloated and a liability to neighborhood aesthetics. There was a low murmur in the gallery. The judge had to gavel it quiet. Then came the documentation. My folder. The Maple Hollow fraud file now states Exhibit A. They walked through the fake minutes, the forged nonprofit papers, the Vistaprint decals, the made-up bylaws, the compliance baskets. They even found a spreadsheet Karen had titled Neighborhood Correctional Plan. Her notes were chilling. Target house on Hillman Street, female overly visible. Maternity belly exaggerated. Remind to park away from main road. Then came the witnesses. Deirdre, old Mr. Gaines, even the mailman. One by one, they told their stories. How she silenced them with threats of fines, letters, and more than anything, social isolation. Jason Mallory, her former partner in crime, tried to walk back his role. But Lila had the receipts, emails, bank transfers, signatures. He squirmed under questioning like a wet eel in a frying pan. And then they called Lila. She walked slowly to the stand. The courtroom hushed. She sat, adjusted her dress, and placed her hands on her swollen belly like armor. She spoke quietly, but every word cut like steel. Karen didn't just frighten me. She made me feel unworthy. That's what broke me. Not the noise, not the knocking, but the message that my pregnancy, my body, my child was an inconvenience. Someone in the back sniffled. The judge didn't stop it this time. Karen had no defense. Her lawyer fumbled with phrases like community aesthetic intent and overzealous concern, but it fell flat. Everyone knew what this was. Harassment disguised as order, control disguised as community, bullying disguised as leadership. She was found guilty on 5 counts: fraudulent collection of HOA dues, impersonation of legal authority, harassment of a pregnant woman, forgery of official documents, use of intimidation for financial gain. Her sentence 18 months in county jail, restitution to over 40 households, and mandatory public apology. The apology was the worst part for her. It was televised. She stood at the very same school gym she once ruled like a queen, her eyes hollow, voice robotic. To the residents of Maple Hollow, I abused your trust. I created false authority. I harmed a family. I'm sorry. No one clapped. Lila didn't even watch. She said, I'd rather talk to our daughter about kindness than relive that woman's shame. The aftermath rippled fast. Jason Mallory lost his license. The bank hosting the fake HOA account donated all unclaimed funds to a maternal health nonprofit. The mayor passed an emergency ordinance requiring any community organization collecting dues to register publicly and undergo external review. The name Karen, once spoken in hushed resentment, became a warning. Kids on bikes would joke, "Don't go full Karen or Marcus will bring receipts." But my fight wasn't over. I got a call from the governor. He'd read the story, listened to the podcast, heard about Lila, and he asked me something I never expected. Would you consider joining a new advisory board on neighborhood reform? You've seen what happens when oversight fails. I accepted, because the battlefield may change, but the mission doesn't. Lila went into labor 2 weeks later. It was a long delivery, complicated, but she was a warrior. At 2:37 a.m., our daughter, Aria Grace Adebayo, let out her first cry like it was a declaration. The nurse whispered, "Strong lungs," I whispered. "She'll need them." The day we brought her home, we passed the spot where Karen had once banged on our window. Now, there was a hand-painted sign out front, Maple Hollow, welcomes all families, no exceptions. I smiled, because that's what justice looks like. Not just in courtrooms, but in quiet promises made visible. It's strange what you remember after the dust settles. Not the courtroom, not the headlines, not even Karen's trembling apology. What I remember most is a sound. The soft squeak of a stroller wheel as it turned down the sidewalk where my wife was once too afraid to walk. That's when I knew Maple Hollow had changed. Not just on paper, but in spirit. The days after Aria's birth were a blur of diapers, bottle sterilizers, and learning how to sleep with one eye open. But even in our exhaustion, Lila and I noticed something unmistakable. The air was different. Neighbors waved again. Kids chalked hearts on the sidewalk outside our home. Someone anonymously sent us a gift basket with a note. Sorry we didn't speak up sooner. Aria's lucky to have parents like you. Karen's house sold within a month. Nobody bought it to flip. A young couple moved in, Cass and Juno, first-time parents with a newborn of their own. They knocked on our door their first week, nervous and apologetic. We heard what happened here. We just want you to know we're not like that, Juno said. I looked at their baby socks and smiled. You moved in at the right time, I told her. The tide has turned, but it wasn't just the neighborhood. I kept my promise to the governor. The Neighborhood Oversight Reform Board, NOR for short, launched that fall. Our mission simple. No more fake HOAs. No more abuse of power disguised as bylaws. No more silencing the vulnerable. We partnered with veteran attorneys, civic engineers, and housing advocates. The first task, a national audit of voluntary associations claiming HOA powers. The results, shocking. Over 600 groups nationwide had no legal standing, yet they had issued fines, seized property access, and bullied residents for years. And people fought back. An 82-year-old in Arizona got her garden back after a fake HOA threatened to bulldoze it. A deaf couple in Georgia won a settlement after being fined for not responding to verbal notices. And a single mom in Wisconsin, who'd been accused of bringing down the neighborhood because of her son's wheelchair ramp, cried on a Zoom call with us when the local council declared her home a protected accessibility landmark. Each case added fuel to our fire, and slowly, the conversation shifted. From how do we keep things orderly to how do we keep things just in Maple Hollow. We started what we called Community Reset Sundays. No bylaws, no agendas. Just people meeting in the park, bringing dishes, telling stories. At first it was maybe 20 people. By month 3, over 200. Old wounds reopened, but not to bleed. To breathe. Deirdre finally spoke again. She said she'd started therapy. Told us about how Karen's harassment had triggered years of buried trauma. We hugged her. No words needed. Mr. Gaines, the old Navy vet with the hand tremor, brought his trumpet one Sunday and played America the Beautiful. People cried, because that's what healing looks like, not dramatic, but deliberate. As for Lila, she bloomed. Motherhood didn't erase the fear Karen left in her. It sharpened her resilience. She joined the board of a prenatal justice nonprofit and started speaking at women's shelters about gaslighting, shame, and how pregnancy doesn't make you public property. Aria grew fast, smiling before 3 months, laughing at 4, at 6 months. She waved at every neighbor she saw, as if reclaiming every window Karen once darkened. One afternoon, while pushing her stroller, we passed the old HOA sign Karen had posted, the one that read, Maple Hollow Order Through Compliance. It was half covered in vines. I stopped, pulled a marker from the diaper bag, and added something underneath. Now community through compassion. The mayor saw it the next day. He didn't erase it. Instead, he invited me to speak at the next city council meeting. Not as a commander, he said, but as a father. I accepted. When I stood at that podium, I didn't talk about military strategy. I didn't talk about law. I talked about a window, the one Karen banged on, the one behind which my wife cried, and how that window had become a mirror, showing all of us what happens when we ignore cruelty, because it comes with a clipboard. Power without accountability isn't order, it's oppression. I told the room, if a woman can be harassed for being pregnant, then no one is safe from being dehumanized. That quote made the paper again, but more importantly, it made a difference. The city passed a new ordinance. Every HOA, real or claimed, must file an annual legitimacy review or risk immediate shutdown. A year passed, then 2. And each July 2nd, our neighborhood's unofficial Independence from Fear Day. We throw a block party, families gather, Chalk art covers the sidewalks, and the only rules are respect, kindness, transparency. Lila bakes strawberry pies. Aria runs through sprinklers, and every time I see someone new move in, I greet them with the same line, "Welcome to Maple Hollow." We don't do fake power here. Justice isn't a gavel, it's a decision to care, to confront, to rebuild better. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse community power for personal control? How do we, as neighbors, stand up to quiet injustice before it becomes loud harm? Share your thoughts because every voice, like every window, deserves to be protected.